Welcome to my breakdown and prediction video for the ESPN fight in between two top-ranked fighters, Shakur Stevenson and Miguel Marriaga. Their fight is the main event, supported by the undercard fights such as Jesse Magdaleno vs Zakaria Lucas, Edgar Berlanga vs Alan Campa, and a couple of other fights as well. For those who don't know me, I'm regularly doing the breakdowns and predictions and recreating the moves of the past and present boxers. If these are the things you're looking for, I'll appreciate you subscribing and hitting the like button. You can find the link for the playlist of my breakdowns and predictions for the upcoming fights in the description, in the pinned comment, or at the end of the video. I was finally able to study Shakur Stevenson's fights closely, and I must tell you that I'm very impressed. Fun fact, the fact that he's from New Jersey and the way he's grinning at his opponents during some of his fights could not stop me from drawing the parallel between him and the legendary Dwight Muhammad Qawi, who also comes from New Jersey. When Shakur is taking a backstep, he's sticking out the jab as a defensive measure while sliding his rear foot further backwards. One of the things that he does with just described movement is pulling back while powering the jab in order to entice the opponent to engage, and then plant his back foot and explode forwards with quick bursts up and down. Also, he's good taking the previously described back steps while throwing jabs, and the moment he plants the rear foot, he feints the jab by taking half step forward with his lead foot and feinting a jab with his lead shoulder, while shifting his weight over the front foot, and then come up with the unexpected wide overhand left upstairs, coming from out of the opponent's peripheral vision, that may be followed by the right hook and the straight left to the solar plexus. At the end of these combos, he often sticks his lead hand out while stepping out of the opponent's range. When the front foot heavy opponents are taking a step forward with their front foot, or when they're carelessly jumping towards his range without being able to throw a punch at that same moment, he times them with the jab. So yes, like you can see, his whole game plan is heavily based around not only his footwork but his jab. Everything he does in the ring starts with a jab most of the times. His lateral movement is very educated and well timed as well. Instead of nervously looking to get out of the ropes as quickly as possible when trapped there, while moving to one side, he's patiently waiting for his opponent to step to his range with a punch or hop into his range with both feet in the air without being able to throw a punch. And that's when Shakur Stevenson uses that split second of his opponent being off balance and unable to follow him laterally to then move out laterally to the other side. Plus, when it comes to Miguel Marriaga, even his past opponent Jose Estrella was able to win the exchanges in their fight by punching while moving laterally. Another very basic yet successful way for Stevenson to get out of ropes is making the escape room by throwing combos, because these combos are pressuring the opponent who trapped him on the ropes and enable Stevenson to move out laterally. So with those combos of his, he's basically putting pressure on his opponent, and behind that pressure that he is putting up against his opponent, meanwhile he's moving out laterally. He has a very quick-handed foot movement, and he controls his orthodox opponent's jab by tapping and parrying with the palm of his lead glove, but also telegraphs his punches when he plants the back foot after stepping back and bursting into his combinations, and he doesn't bring his gloves up neither. I enjoyed a lot him fading Jesse Chris Rosales just for a split second in order to make him put up a tight high guard and throwing short combos or single punches from there. That's what I like about his feints, because he's not only feinting with both fighters still staying out of each other's range after feinting, but Shakur Stevenson is actively using his feints to set up his attacks with them by making the opponent change his guard and then attack him right away after putting him into a desired position. While pulling out of range after his combos, he always sticks out his lead glove to the opponent's face or guard, and it's not only done with the aim of distracting the opponent with your glove, although it is partially the reason, but also because it's a difficult position for the opponent to catch you with a punch over your lead right hand stuck out like that into his face, because with your lead arm in such a position, your lead shoulder is supposed to protect your jaw. He plays a lot on forcing the opponent to put up his guard in a certain way by combining the wide circular punches coming out of the opponent's peripheral vision, so he could open up down the middle, where Shakur Stevenson could sneak in a straight punch, the most often his right jab. Or he can do the opposite by jabbing and making the opponent put up a tight guard in front of his face, so Stevenson could come around with his hooks. I see the influence of Vasily Lomachenko, the way he acts at mid-range in front of an opponent with a high guard. Just like Lomachenko, he likes to slap his guard down with one hand and immediately sneak in the other hand afterwards. But also the use of throwaway arm punches at mid-range with the aim of occupying the opponent, either with the aim of finding an opening or with the aim of getting himself in a superior position compared to his opponent while overloading him with those throwaway punches. Shakur Stevenson is a very reactive fighter, especially on the outside, where he depends on his timing to counter the telegraphed punches or catch the opponent in an unbalanced position. When it comes to Stevenson fighting at close range, he's highly educated inside fighter despite him choosing to fight on the outside most of the time. He keeps his eye on the opponent and keep a tight guard. And with that tight guard, he's able to catch a lot of punches, doing a solid job of blocking the body shots with his elbows and the headshots with his gloves. What also surprised me is that while he's very open for the counter punches whenever he plants his feet and throws his combinations, he's still able to catch a fair number of his opponent's counter hooks and looping punches upstairs on his gloves. When his opponent is stepping in with a punch from mid-range, Stevenson would block it with his guard and proceed to moving right forward into his opponent to close the gap between them by stepping in chest to chest, and he twists his upper body in such a manner where he turns one of his shoulders into his opponent's guard so he isn't squared up anymore. And what's even more important, at that same time he creates the room for his glove that's opposite of that shoulder by making it his rear hand while he's smothering his opponent with with that shoulder of the opposite arm, and he attacks him with that rear glove while staying shielded behind his shoulder of that opposite hand. He also creates the angles on the inside by stepping in from mid to close range, and once he's at that close range, he smothers the opponent's guard by placing his own guard right into his opponent's guard, while keeping his upper body straight in front of that opponent, and meanwhile works on placing his lead foot in front of his opponent's lead foot. Or he can make some variations of that same concept by manhandling the opponent by pushing their head away or down with his lead glove, and maneuvering and pushing their guard down with his rear glove, while still pivoting his feet around theirs. There is also another move of his that's very similar to one of the Lomachenko's moves. He can be seen using it on the inside as the mean of getting to the blind angle. So what he does is, he uses his upper body movement as a distraction among the other reasons. He slips his head to one side while simultaneously placing his opposite foot outside of his opponent's foot. Shakur Stevenson frequently sticks out his lead glove to the opponent's forehead or guard in order to keep him at distance, and throws the rear hook to the body while still keeping his lead glove on his opponent, then steps out of range. But if his opponent is boxing from the orthodox stance, let's say, and Stevenson sticks out his lead glove in the previously described manner, and his opponent tries to do the same thing with his own lead glove, Stevenson is looking precisely for that moment where his opponent is beginning to mirror Stevenson's move by sticking out his own jab to counter him with the right hook. Another thing that I like about him on the inside is in regards of his defense, where he keeps a high guard at mid-range, and when his opponents are telegraphing their body punch or uppercut, he blocks it by stepping in with his guard and his upper body right behind it. So he's stepping into that punch with his guard. That way he catches and smothers that punch in its early stage, before it's fully thrown and way before it reaches its full extension. At the same time he finds himself at close instead of mid-range. And I estimate that his defense at mid-range could be much better, especially in two different situations. One, where he's using his upper body movement to evade the punches without trying to counter, and his opponents are throwing 3, 4, 5 piece combos, varying their attacks up and down. When they throw a punch or two to his body and then come up with the next punch upstairs, they tend to catch him. The other situation is one that I already mentioned earlier, when he plants his feet at mid-range and is looking to throw his combos, usually his overhand left, right hook, straight left downstairs combo, because he telegraphs them and throws them very wide, and there is really a lot of room for straight counters. It reminds me a lot of the same thing Terence Crawford tends to do at mid-range himself. On the other hand, what kept Stevenson safe a lot of times in those situations was that he feints a jab or a lead hook before throwing his combos, so because of that he was able to offset his previous opponents or make them put up a high guard and go into defensive mode during his combos, thus making them unable to counter him because they are preoccupied with their defense. Although he won his last fight against Joet Gonzalez in a very dominant fashion. I really believe there was a couple of instances, although very short and very few instances indeed, where Joet Gonzalez showed us what may be the right weapon to beat him. On the other hand, like I said, Stevenson gave him a very few opportunities to show them. However, in those very few opportunities, he made Shakur Stevenson step out of range and counter with a jab like he always does, but Joet was keeping his distance and balance and pulling his upper body back to evade the Stevenson counter jab and countered his counter with a left hook. And that's something that I saw Marriaga do as well. Despite Stevenson being a very educated inside fighter, not only Gonzalez showed up to be the better inside fighter than Stevenson's previous opponents and was using the similar technique that Stevenson is using all the time on the inside, but he also won a couple of exchanges there simply because he let his hands go and was more active than Stevenson in the pocket, who is rather looking to be perfect on the inside and pick his shots, and because of that he got outlanded in those couple of exchanges because of that. Joet was occupying him on the inside with quick bursts, making him block those punches, then was coming up with the looping punches over Stevenson's lead shoulder, and when stepping in with punches from mid-range, immediately after throwing them, he was giving him the taste of his own medicine by smothering him and preventing any possible retaliation. As far from what I've seen of Shakur Stevenson, here are some other things that I guess could give him trouble beside the ones already mentioned. Those are feints and upper body movement, the volume in general as he fights very negatively and prefers to pick his shots, then in and out movement and distance control with the aim of making him counter and then countering his counters, cutting off the ring, straight counters, doubling and tripling the punches with the same hand, switching the fighting range in between mid and short distance. However, let's take a look at Miguel Marriaga and see how he compares to Stevenson. Some of his characteristics are the constant upper body movement, good quick and unorthodox combos from the weird angles, hooking off the jab and throwing a dangerous and sneaky overhand right counter while moving his head off the line and changing levels. Stevenson may use straight punches to the body and would probably move laterally after punching, like he always does. What Marriaga does well is feinting straight punches to the body and coming up with something upstairs. And his counter left hook is very dangerous too. Either upstairs, especially against a southpaw in Stevenson, or to the liver because that liver shot is constantly hurting, dropping and stopping people. One of his ways to set up the left hook is to pow with his jab while taking half a step back and wait for the opponent to step into his range. But he also constantly sets up his counters of his upper body movement as well. Or he goes behind a high guard, letting his opponents to tee off their combinations on him, and he's looking to catch them with the counter left hook in the midst of their combinations. So the double jabs and finishing his combos with the jab would do Stevenson favor, as he would counter Marriaga leading or countering with the left hook. Miguel Marriaga himself likes to step in behind the double jab, and once he cuts off the distance, he throws the chopping right hand from the different angles. He's also setting the overhand right by stepping laterally to the left on his jab. I can see him having success on the inside against Stevenson if he keeps his work rate higher than Stevenson's. But at the same time, I don't see Stevenson giving him that many opportunities to fight on the inside in the first place. And on the other hand, I must admit that he was looking great in the pocket against the opponents who were not trying to prevent him from operating there, which probably would not be the case with Stevenson, as I already described his inside fighting skills. So his combo attacks being one of his best weapons, it would be difficult for him to effectively use them, as Shakur Stevenson's constant use of footwork and his negative style are not going to allow Miguel to step in and tee off those combos on a stationary target. Stevenson would probably be out of range on his first jab. Marriaga is probably going to try to catch Stevenson's punches on his guard and counter with left hooks and uppercuts, or the left hook chopping right hand combo. But he needs to be careful about stepping in and leading with a slow straight right hand, because when he leads with the straight right, he often throws it very slow and without conviction, as if he's powering with it, making it seem like his leading right hand is a throwaway punch. And it's often the case with his jab as well. And I think that that's exactly because he uses that powering straight right to set up his 2-1 combo that he uses often, as well as using that powering jab for the 1-2-1 combo. In fact, his 1-2-1 combo with closing the distance by jumping in on that last jab may probably be a good weapon for him, at least at the beginning, but I'm not sure for how long. And like I said, Marriaga can be very tricky with his combos, and especially that particular one, as he's constantly throwing punches from the various angles, and the same goes for his other combos. But at the same time, even Alfredo Mejia Vargas was able to time him in between his slow straight right and a jab, so Stevenson's counter jab should be able to disrupt it as well. By the way, Stevenson is not very physical in his fights, and Marriaga is neither. Neither one of them is actively looking to use and impose their physical strength even on the inside. The prediction time. First of all, I'm not going to bet on this fight, being that the odds are very low, and I'm currently limited to the French bookmakers mostly, who are only offering you to bet on a fighter A, a fighter B, or a draw. But it will change once I become able to use the Asian and the US bookmakers. With that being said, I'm picking Shakur Stevenson to win, with both the decision and the stoppage being possible. Stevenson isn't extremely heavy-handed, and Marriaga is very tough and durable, but I would not be surprised if Stevenson catches Marriaga with something in between his punches. Anyways, if Stevenson boxes negatively for the biggest part of the fight, like I think may be the case, I'm giving an advantage to the decision victory for Stevenson. Thank you for watching.